I have 44 people in and none in the waiting room, and I'll let them in as we move along.
Okay, great. Then let's get started. I'll bring this meeting of the Dixon Unified School District Board of Trustees to order. This special meeting, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Roll call. All board members are present. And for anyone who has not already done one of these Zoom meetings, everyone should have been muted that's not currently on the board. If you wish to make a comment at the appropriate time, please use the raise your hand function, or you can even put a chat comment and Mark will take you off mute so that you may voice your comment or question. Thank you for everyone who's filled out the questionnaires that we're going to talk about tonight. That's much appreciated. Okay, we'll get this special meeting started. Notice to public. Persons wishing to speak to agenda items may present their written requests at this time. While the written request is optional, those making a written request will be recognized first. The board president will recognize you for the discussion at the appropriate time. Speakers may be limited to 5 minutes per topic at the discretion of the board president. And governing board workshop on reopening of schools.
All right, good evening, everybody. We're happy to have this chance to spend some really kind of devoted time to look at what we have to be prepared for the return of school come August. One way or another, come August is what we're planning on. So when we initially talked about having this meeting tonight, it was done in the context of asking the governing board to make decisions about what our plan was moving forward in the with regards to the start of the school year. And what I want to say preemptorily tonight is that I think what the administrative team wants to do both tonight and then with the follow-up on Thursday at our regular meeting is run through some of the feedback that we've received from our parents and staff and community. Remind everybody of the 4 scenarios that we've been talking about engaging in as possible means of instruction. There's a little twist, I think, that we have to talk about with regards to distance learning and traditional learning as well that we will get into. The cabinet team wants to share with you kind of our to-do lists at this point in time, the things that are on the list, which hopefully will serve as evidence of the fact that we are planning and we are considering everything that we need to consider here as we move along towards the 2020-21 school year. And then take input from the board and the community, questions, input. I think we've reached a point of concluding that we're not sure, or I guess we couldn't say, we think here's the clear-cut decision that question that we could put in front of the board on Thursday night. There are so many variables over which we have no control. I think what you will end up doing in the end is saying, yes, continue to prepare for all possibilities. And tonight, hopefully what you'll see is that we are fully engaged in preparing for all possibilities, and time will tell what we actually get to do. So with that preamble, I'm going to ask Mr. Giramani to take the show here and share the survey data which has been collected from across our community. Mr. G.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, as Mr. Dolan said, I'm going to start tonight just with some data from the surveys that we put out through a number of different avenues. We're not going to go through the entire set of questions because we'd be here all night for that. Nor are we going to look at all the comments because we'd be here all night for that. So what we've tried to do is comb through those a little bit and try to come up with some broad trends for you all to consider. At the same time, anything you want more information about, we can dig back into the surveys at any time. Just to refresh everyone, we've done a number of surveys. Sorry, I've got a 3-year-old who's suddenly very curious about what's going on with his father. And a 10-year-old to the rescue. Okay. So the first survey that we've done was not actually thrown out to the entire community. We generated a random list across our schools to make sure that we had all of our demographic groups represented. And then we had our parent liaisons actually making phone calls to those families in English and Spanish to be able to make sure we got everybody who wanted to respond. And we shot for 350 respondents to have a margin of error plus or minus 5%. We didn't quite get that many, but we're going to be at a plus or minus 7% on our margin of error with that. And we feel like that's some pretty good data. The focus of that survey was really on how's distance learning going for your kid? And I'll get into some of those questions here in a moment. We also asked teachers to do a second survey. They did a survey at the very beginning of distance learning. And that really, the primary purpose of that at first was who needs help with regard to getting instructional technology off the ground. And the second survey wanted to see, well, what have we learned? But then also, how do the teachers feel their kids are enacting with distance learning? And so we'll juxtapose what our parents are saying and what our teachers are saying. I think there's some pretty interesting similarities and differences there, is what I'll say. We did 2 other surveys that we're going to talk through tonight. The other one is the one that most people are familiar with who might be watching. We have over 800 respondents in our community, and that really is kind of this reopening survey, very broad strokes. You know, what are people interested in? Here are the different scenarios to consider. And then we sent essentially the same survey with just some reworded questions to our staff as well. So we'll look at both of those surveys there to look at similarities and differences between our groups. And then I'll mention that one of the other, of course, very key sort of pieces of information from us is going to come from our bargaining groups. And Cindy will talk about that as she progresses. So I just want to sort of share that first, and then if I could share the screen. Mark, can you enable me to do that? I think you have to make me a host. I promise I will not abuse that power.
No Tiger King.
No.
You now have the screen. Take it quickly before I take it back.
Okay, so this should be what I want to share. Yeah, all right. Is everyone seeing that?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so this again is, we're not going through all the questions tonight, at least as part of the plan, but the board, of course, can ask for whatever they want. So the first set of numbers here really deal with our distance learning questions. How is distance learning going? We asked a number of questions, but we pared it down to some really essential ones. So the first is, my child seems engaged and interested in doing the work provided by his or her teacher. We were really concerned at first about busy work going out to families. That really wasn't something that kids were interested in doing, and we'd lose them really quickly. So you can see here the results. Well over 50% of our families either agree or strongly agree with that. So we were actually fairly pleased with that. You know, I don't want to ignore the fact that we have 12%-ish who are would disagree with that. And also neutral is not, we'd like to see more than a quarter of our families saying neutral. Our next sort of key question that we wanted to ask, and this was sort of the summation of this section of the survey, was distance learning is working for my child, you know, and you can see the results there. You know, really concerned, 27% of folks are disagreeing with that statement. I'm not surprised by that. Frankly, this was a completely new way of going for us. We have a lot of students who receive additional supports in our district that we've tried to provide, but that was all very new. At the same time, again, a fair amount of folks would strongly agree with that, and then we're at 20% of neutral. So a little more of a mixed bag with this question than the first one. We want to know about what people thought about the amount of work the child's being asked to do. So we framed it as too much, too little, just right, or not sure. You can see most folks thought it was just right, and then about the same amount of too much and too little. And then, of course, the not sure is not surprising for some of our families who just don't know. And then then the next part was we wanted to find out about technology. So we were really, if you'll recall, when we first rolled this out, we were really concerned about technology being a barrier for our students. So you can see that people have hardware. We had total, I think, of 2 responding families that said they did not. I'm not trying to dismiss what they're going through, but that's a decent number for us. And then the next piece of that, of course, is the adequate internet service in the home. We can see there again, 92% yes, 7.5% no. I think our takeaway with the technology piece is, should we need to continue distance learning at some point next year? Technology won't be our impediment. And that's a good thing. The people who don't have computers and those who lack internet service, this is a really manageable amount of people for us to go after and support them. In fact, we already have, we think we probably already have enough wireless devices for families to be able to get on who are in this no category should we need to do this again next year. So good, we can check one thing off, that technology is not going to be our main issue. That said, for these families who don't have it, it's a big deal. Our final question on this section for our families, we want to know, did they think we were communicating enough? So we just said my child's school has communicated adequately. We went back and forth on whether we say district. Most people see it as the school who's communicating them. So we phrased the question this way. And again, you can see the numbers there. About 9% of folks would say no, 16% neutral. The rest would say that we're doing okay in this regard. Okay, and just for the record, there wasn't a lot of difference between our English respondents and our Spanish respondents. They essentially were about the same. And then we get into our staff data around how distance learning is going. So we want to know first, are they participating? So you can see here, it's not too different between our elementary and our secondary, a little bit of difference. We're at about, well, you can see it there, what the data says. We'd love to get more kids, obviously in that 50% to 74%. We need to raise that up. We can also tease this out by elementary and secondary, as well as by teacher, but we didn't do that for this report yet. The next one was evaluate the statement of the students that are participating. I feel they are learning and growing academically in this current digital learning environment. So, numbers speak for themselves on that. Again, not surprised considering how many kids we have that we know are at grade level, and this is really challenging for those folks. And it's our first time. I actually, well, I won't say my assumption, but you can see there are our results so far. And then we wanted, again, to know how our teachers were doing. I didn't include the pre-data on this, but these numbers are really improved from where we were a month ago. Teachers, I think Jill Fry at the last board meeting mentioned how much growth she'd seen in her own practice and her colleagues' practice when she was asking about Chromebooks being available to kids. And that tends to be our sense of things. I really want to give some shout outs to our teachers who've grown so much in this very difficult, and it's a new thing, right? But also to the Ed Services staff who've really supported folks throughout this process. So most folks are feeling pretty comfortable here at this point. Again, neutral is not great, but it's better than disagree. And we've clearly got 12 to 13% of our staffs who need some additional support from us. And this was just certificated staff, by the way. So just teachers. Okay, so that is the kind of the, again, broad strokes from just the distance learning piece. And I think, if I could speak for the group, the general takeaways here was this hasn't been a disaster. We've seen some, at places positive feedback. Our teachers have grown a lot. Our kids are feeling engaged, and technology is not an impediment to us. But as we've said all along, if we engage in distance learning again, it has to be better. We've kind of started referring to it as distance learning 2.0. We've learned a ton, and we will get better. But this seems like a good place to start from. So I think I'll stop here if there are any questions about this sort of set of data before we move on to the next piece.
Okay, any board questions? No, just a couple, Nick, as a practical matter, even though it wasn't a lot of people, those couple of families that didn't have hardware, or the families that didn't have an internet connection, have we taken some action to try to help those individuals?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's possible that the parent liaison put them on their list and it came up that way, but I don't know.
Okay.
And we can follow up with them. We have their information, so we can.
Okay.
Can I jump in real quickly?
Yes, please do, Mark.
All the hotspots are configured. The parent liaisons were given the list today, and they are making calls so they can come in and get the hotspot wireless internet. So I expect by the end of the week, our 150-ish to be out in the field being used.
Great, thank you. Any other board questions or comments? Nick, you prefer to do this in chunks, so should we go to public comment, or do you want to get through your whole presentation and then open it up?
The last part's pretty quick. It's not as detailed, but your call. I'm fine either way.
Why don't we, well, let's go ahead and continue, because I have a feeling if I ask for public comment, it will be hard to stay on the learning, distance learning issue, and then we'll just cover everything at the end.
Okay. So in the next set of surveys that we talked about were really kind of around these reopening scenarios, right? Didn't really ask specifically about the distance learning piece, because we felt like we had, that data from our targeted poll felt really good. We knew we were hearing from a lot of teachers on that as well. So we want to now kind of shift the focus to what do you want to see or what don't you want to see? So this is a little hard to read here, and I apologize. We framed the question, what's your preferred, second preferred, and least preferred? And I see a typo in there in my graph, sorry. Can you all see this, or should I try and make it bigger?
Bigger, please, Nick.
Okay, give me 1 second. Okay. All right, so yeah, so you can see here that the most preferred, and so the first one is just from our community. If staff took it, I mean, they could have taken it, and some are community members and parents as well, so it's possible they took it as a parent community member. We don't think we had too many that took it, and at least not so much that would skew the data significantly. So obviously people's most preferred option is sending their kid back to school. Their least preferred is continuing with distance learning, which we thought was a little interesting. From the message we got from the other survey was like, okay, this hasn't been an unmitigated disaster, but please take these children back. Not really that surprising. And then obviously this second preferred here is the kind of partial or limited return. If these numbers don't all add up to you, remember that folks could click more than one for any of these. So if they thought reopening fully and distance learning were both their most preferred, they could have clicked most preferred for both. Then when we go to staff, it's a little bit less, it jumps, okay, sorry, it jumped spaces on me here. Let me a second. I'm gonna try and get this up one. Try and get on the same page. I lost it, excuse me. I tried to make it fancy with these columns, and it always messes things up. Where did it go? I promise you I had it. Give me 1 second here. Okay, well, I lost the graph. I can come back later, but you can see here in the table where we are. It's a little less cut and dry with staff. Again, most preferred would be the reopen fully, but slightly and about the same for least preferred. So, you know, you kind of got a mixed bag there that we didn't necessarily see with our other folks. The least preferred here would be distance learning total from staff. That's aligned with the families. But sort of equal to the fully reopen is this partial or limited reopening. I had to tell you, I was a little surprised by that, just because I thought staff might be really concerned from a safety standpoint. But this seems like they're trusting, they would trust the ability of the district to be able to put things right if we do return this way. So just interesting differences there, as we say. Okay, and then if we go to the next question was just interested in a late start July. You know, and someone did point out to me, and I'll own this, that maybe the way it was framed made it really sound unpalatable. When we did the phrasing, we said most likely in a distance learning scenario. And the reason that I put that in there, we put that in there, was simply because we can't foresee us coming back with people by late July. We were probably a little premature in that. It's possible that we could be. But in any case, staff and community are saying they're just not interested in that early start, as you can see there from the results. And then the graph here demonstrates that. And then we asked the question about coming back in early September. So kind of more traditional, kind of after Labor Day start. And this was, had a lot more interest from folks, especially our community members who well over 50% said they were interested in exploring this. And then even with staff, it was over 50% as well. But then you had, you know, close to 20% between the two groups that were not interested in this. Would like to keep our current schedule. So we'll explore this later on, and this is just kind of baseline data for us. Okay. Like I said, that part would be really a much quicker piece. Again, not all the questions, and we certainly didn't dive into the comments on these because there were just so many. I know the board has had a chance to peruse those, as some of you had. But I think generally, Brian would confirm this as well. You know, most people are concerned about safety in any of these scenarios. You know, even the folks who don't want distance learning, I think would say if it's dangerous, we shouldn't do it. Some people have expressed that they don't feel it's dangerous, and that's their prerogative and their opinion. That's fine. But even those who are interested in coming back full time, I think would say if it's safe.
Hey, Nick,
Yep.
I did see there was a comment that one person said they couldn't mark something as their first pick. They could only mark a second pick. And so I just want to make sure, I mean, that you haven't heard that from other people, right?
I have not, no.
We're confident that people were able to mark and give us the responses they intended.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, aside from when I first put it out and didn't click the button to let people not in Dixon Unified take the survey, which I knew within 3 minutes of pushing go on it. That's the first I've heard of people not being able to do anything. So.
Okay. Okay, do we have any, are you ready for questions, Nick?
Absolutely.
Yeah, any board questions or comments on this part?
I do have a question. The one thing about starting late in September that people seemed interested in, the part that was concerning to me is it didn't state how much of next summer, the 2021 summer, that would be taken away because of school. So, you know, yeah, late start, but some of your summer is going to be taken away the following summer. I'm not sure was as clear.
Yeah, I would say that I think any of these, as we sort of get further along in any process, that we've got to go back out and ask more questions. Like, do you really want this? This is what this means. You know, it may not be, it would certainly be summer, but probably even other breaks as well would need to be impacted. And if you're going to go 180, you know, we need to keep 180 days. So yeah, no, it's a great point, Melissa.
Nick, this is Lloyd. I'm wondering, as I look at your staff data, you have 38% that are least preferred in reopening. And I'm wondering if that's because they think the pandemic is still going to be with us. And they're afraid that, you know, something could happen on campus if all the kids come back like they normally do. I'm just wondering, I mean, why would 38% of the faculty disagree with reopening the school fully? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I'll actually take that if I can, Nick.
Please.
We have had recent conversation with leadership from DTA, Dixon Teachers Association, and then there's ongoing dialogue with SEIU, our classified unit as well. There's a very genuine and large concern about safety. It's all about both students and staff becoming ill or the pandemic spreading. So it really is the driving force that is out there. And I think people remain concerned to some degree as well about being able to take care of their own family members as well as this goes through. So.
Yeah, and we do have a comment from Ms. Prack-Smith saying that some do have family members with immune compromised situations. And that's true not only for our staff, but the students and all the families in the community. So obviously balancing student learning with safety, but it has to be safe, is the big issue. So Nick, are you going to put up any of the flow sheet sort of advice that's come out from CDC or Solano County? You know, are we gonna? I don't know how deep in the weeds we're gonna go tonight, but
yeah, we did not we did not go into those particular elements. I've got one. Hold on, right here. And let me just tell you that here's the criteria from the CDC that would allow you to open and monitor. Okay, so let me just run through. Oh, there's 6 or 7 bullets here. According to the CDC, you can or should open and monitor if you develop and implement procedures to check for signs and symptoms of students and employees daily upon arrival as feasible. That's a tough one. Second one, easy, encourage anyone who is sick to stay home. The third one, plan for if students or employees get sick. That's fairly easy if in terms of students getting ill. We have no idea what this whole thing is going to do to our substitute pool and our ability to get substitutes, especially long terms. The next one, regularly communicate and monitor developments with local authorities, employees, and families regarding cases, exposures, and updates to policies and procedures. So that one is something we're actually really currently doing, although we are not tracking cases, exposures, and such. The next one, monitor student and employee absences and have flexible leave policies and practices. That most of all would involve an awful lot of negotiations with both of our labor groups and compliance with new law regarding leaves related to the pandemic. And then finally, be ready to consult with the local health authorities if there are cases in the facility or an increase in cases in the local area. So most of those sound actually pretty reasonable when you get them that way. But let me go back to the first bullet. Develop and implement procedures to check for signs and symptoms of students and employees daily upon arrival as feasible. Another point that is not included in that criteria that frankly scares us really significantly, and we'll touch upon this a little bit more later, is the cleaning requirements, the sanitizing requirements. What we're hearing and is being suggested right now sounds Herculean in an understatement. Mark and I were looking at a picture today. He showed me from a newspaper. I'd seen it myself online. I think it was a dining or it might have been a restaurant bar, and in the in the bar area, they had PVC pipes with plastic screens up, and we thought, that might be a way to get some isolation on the cheap. But imagine if we're doing that for every classroom, and what some of those things may involve. So the CDC criteria is pretty clear, but it doesn't account for everything, because I don't think we'd see a lot of families comfortable coming back if they don't know how we're going to clean classrooms, how the environment is going to be kept as sanitary as possible.
Well, Brian, I think that's one comment I wanted to make. When people are talking about coming back to a partial reopening, I get the impression that folks think that somehow we're going to clean in between groups of students, so that we would have an AM class, then we'd come in and have janitorial, staff come and clean, and then we'd have a PM class or something like that. Or, we'd clean in between the Monday, Wednesday groups or something. And I don't think that that's going to be any cleaner than it is if we had all kids there every day, really. I think the social distancing might be different. But in terms of the idea that we would have, teams of night custodian crews that would come in and sanitize our schools, that's just not feasible. And
No,
so I think we need to just put these things into perspective around what that really means when we talk about a modified schedule.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, when you get down to the nitty-gritty about what you do for sanitizing and disinfecting, a lot of the things that I've read say it needs to be happening not only every night, but during the school day. And you really start getting into some of the specifics. I mean, I've read stuff about toilet flushing without toilet covers. There's a plume of potential germs from that. They've found that fecal matter can have COVID for 33 days in it. So the bathrooms could be a real problem. We'd have to have those cleaned multiple times every day. And I'm still not sure, in terms of getting PPE, hand sanitizer, I don't know if we'd be able to get it. And if we did, I don't know if the stuff we use without alcohol is effective on this novel coronavirus versus other things. There's issues with, do we have adequate manpower to do the cleaning, all those things. So, I'm sure we'll talk a lot more
about some of those, yeah.
But, it's when we get guidance, it's great, but of course there's a lot of specifics that have to go into every little area of guidance. Is it even feasibly possible to social distance for a full return of school? What would that even look like when you've got a social distance going into school, going out of school, in every class, in between every class? The classrooms are not made for that. So, I'm sure those are things that are going to come up tonight.
Well, yeah, and frankly, kids aren't made for that either, right?
Yeah, and certainly different ages have different challenges for that.
Yes, they do. So we wanted to just refresh everyone's memory on the 4 scenarios that we've been talking about as potentials here. And then the little twist that we've been having some discussions regarding since our last meeting. So scenario 1, open in the business as usual model. Scenario 2 is open in distance learning 2.0, so the improved revised version of distance learning. Scenario 3 is open in a reduced attendance model, is one of the ways I've been calling it. So this is the split shift or the alternate days. Perhaps some kids come Monday and Wednesday and the other kids come Tuesday and Thursday, or the AM, PM, those types of things. And then scenario 4 is the idea that we open in business as usual and then have to close and go distance learning somewhere along the way because of the health conditions. So the scenario that we are now, I think, dealing with probably is at the top of the list, honestly. It's a scenario where we are officially open at business as usual, but that we have significant numbers of families who are concerned about the health and safety of coming back into the school environment, and so would be asking for distance learning. And so really having to offer 2 programs to a substantial number of families. And that could go either way. We're kind of presuming that most families would want to come back to school, and so there'd be a smaller percentage wanting distance learning. But it is also feasible, thinking this year for the first time, that you could have the smaller percentage of people wanting to come back into traditional school. And I guess either way, whatever that split is between those two, could lead to a decision either to go full traditional or go full distance if things fell a particular way and families were making certain kinds of decisions. So again, 4 options, and then option, I guess it's in a class of its own, this hybrid of 1 and 2. Open business as usual, number 1. Open full distance learning, number 2. Open in the split shift or reduced attendance requirement, number 3. Open business as usual and have to close somewhere along the way because of the pandemic. And then what we now believe we absolutely have to prepare for is this idea that we would be providing both models of service to some unknown number of families. Again, thinking that that would be more distance learning families. There would be a smaller percentage of families looking for distance learning. So take any board questions just on those scenarios before we jump into.
Jewel, you're on mute. There you go.
Hello?
Yeah,
Go
we got
for
you
it,
now,
Jewel.
Jewel.
Okay. Those families who choose to return to business as usual, and looking at those CDC guidelines and having stood in line at UC Davis to get my temperature taken so I can enter the hospital, along with 30 other people, all trying to maintain distance. How are we going to do that? I mean, is somebody going to be at the door? Because otherwise, I don't think people are going to feel safe.
Yeah, and I think the quick, simple answer right now, Jewel, is we certainly don't have the capacity to provide that kind of monitoring, and would have to invest really heavily in a variety of ways to be able to develop that. And we are like every other school district in the country in that regard. There's nobody who has these systems set up at this point in time. Other questions or thoughts on the scenarios?
So,
Well,
I mean, oh, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
that's okay.
Go
I was
ahead.
just going, this is just a thought. In my mind, if the pandemic is still prevalent in California and in the nation, I don't see how we can return to school as normal. I don't see how that's even possible. I think and then you have 4 options, but you really only have 2. Because I don't know with what the governor has released in his budget, whether or not we could afford 2 of your options at all. If you're going to take an 8.5 to 10% cut, I don't know how that's even possible to sanitize, every classroom once a day or every time a group rotates out of them. I just don't see how that's possible. So what I'm looking at just, internally, and I don't like it, is the distance learning model, which is not perfect, and we know it's got problems. And then the other model would be if the pandemic goes away during the summer and never returns, then obviously we could talk about returning everybody back to school. But I don't see that happening right now. And that's just my 2 cents for what it's worth.
Yeah, so of course, Lloyd's comment about fiscal ability to get things done is, of course, reality that we're going to have to look at. I mean, if we're going to talk about reopening, in my personal opinion, I don't think, if we're going to look at it in terms of can we meet the social distancing and disinfecting standards and things that the experts are saying, I don't see how we possibly do that with a full school of kids. The opening and allowing some families to opt out to distance learning, depending on how many people choose to do one versus the other, maybe that makes social distancing feasible. And maybe it allows for, and it would be a point of coming up with a system and negotiation if there are teachers who are higher risk and have concerns. Maybe, you know, depending on how we do the distance learning, we can shift teachers around to do that. But I've read a lot of articles about the things that need to be done to safely return people to school. And I just don't see in a full normal return how we can possibly do it. There was one school in the UK that came back, and one teacher who had no symptoms tested positive after meeting with a class, and every kid in the class and their families had to be quarantined for 2 weeks. So, you know, I mean, maybe we would or wouldn't do that. I don't know what the state will order, but there's a lot of concerns, and obviously we'd have to go into a lot of detail about how we would meet all the requirements, how we would handle. There's things about marking on the floor, and with the younger kids, I mean, not every classroom has hand washing stations, and bathrooms could be areas of infection. And you know, so yeah, I don't know how we begin to really address this with the lack of information that we have at this point.
Yeah, that's a huge part of the challenge. Yes.
Yeah.
So after reading through a lot of the comments from staff and community members, that seems to be one of the concerns as far as custodial staff and us having enough manpower. We, as we go back and when, are going to have to most likely hire more people to clean classrooms to make sure that they can get to everything that we need to do. And that really concerns me with our budget things that we have coming up. The other thing that I'm wondering, and maybe Nick, I don't know if you've discussed this, I think that there are teachers who are working really hard to provide education to our children through distant learning. But with that being said, I think that there are some things that are probably being missed. I don't know if as much material can be covered. And I'm saying that with all due respect to how hard everyone's working. And so what is our plan, and where does that fall to go over to review students so they're ready for the next year's material? So they are, or are we expecting the next grade students to spend a month or the next grade teacher to spend a month or so reviewing? What are we, how's that going to fit in?
Let me take those separately if I could. The first part of your question around, you know, and you and I have the same message here. Thank you to everybody. You know, when I look at that data, you know, if you told me a month ago that was going to be the outcome data, I would have taken it hands down, knowing where we were starting from. So thanks to everybody for their hard work, and to our families for walking that journey with us. But it's not good enough for next year, period. Even with our best folks who've knocked this out, we've got to cover more curriculum. We've got to get better with synchronous and asynchronous learning. We've got to figure out assessment. We cannot do pass, no pass if we continue at secondary. I know a month ago I was arguing vociferously for that, but I don't believe that would be appropriate next year at this point. You know, things obviously could change. So all those things have to get better in distance learning 2.0. And the main thing is we need to tighten up our expectations and kind of how we're delivering. And, you know, because we were learning so much at the beginning, we really weren't in a position to be able to say, everyone must do this. We sort of deliberately, and this, I was actually some consultation with my colleagues in Solano County, deliberately said, let's have some standards, but let's let people play a little bit and see where they can get. And through that process, that was the right call because we've learned a lot, but we will tighten it up next year. The second part of the question was around, what was the second part of the question? Sorry.
It was around reviewing for the
Yeah. Yeah, that is, well, I'll answer that two ways. One, no, sweetheart, thank you. Family's going on a walk and the little one wants to know if I'm coming. Hey, I need you to go. Grab your brother, please. Bye-bye. Timing is great. Yes, so he sees a lot of people he can say hi to. Did I mention that my preference is that we all go back to normal, please?
Yes.
Anyway, so, every year this is a challenge for us, regardless of, we know that we have students who walk in not having mastered the standards of the year prior, period. We know that those are going to be exacerbated this year. To what extent is really the million-dollar question. We obviously have not been able to assess like we have in the past. There are some unique ideas that are out there about how you might tackle that. In our conversation last week, Catlin talked about one that the state board president, Linda Darling-Hammond, had talked about, where kids actually start in their previous grade for a month. Okay, he's gonna make me let you say hi. Okay, there you go.
Benji!
Bye-bye. There we go. He is all of three.
He's
And your
already
son.
got you figured out.
All of three and your son, Mr.
That's true.
Giovanni.
I was an easy child, just ask my mom.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm really sorry, by the way.
Not at all.
Please do
So,
not worry.
yeah, I mean, so Melissa, I wish I had a better answer for you on this at this point. I just today had a conversation with Scott Emmel, our math coach, about, what do we do with elementary in this regard, and the work that we've done there, he feels like we're actually pretty well positioned to catch kids in elementary moving forward with math. But that's a place where we've invested a lot of time and resources and systems. That's not necessarily the case throughout the rest of our TK-12 offerings. I think one of the ways we address that is by creating more fluid interventions than we've had in the past. I think is a really key way to do that. Kids tend to enter intervention in our district right now and stay there, and that's not really a model that most research would say is the best one. It's one we need to explore anyway, and another opportunity for us to try and figure out some ways where kids get what they need, and then move back to a non-intervention model so that we can get other kids in there who we know need those things.
So
I want to let me tell you what I would like to try to do, Luke, if we can, and
Sure.
if that works for you. So we have about a 3-page bulleted document the cabinet put together by department of the things that we need to plan for, the things that we need to address. And many of them are things that are coming up as questions. And I've asked Mr. Monticello to be ready to share that on the screen. And our intent here is not to go through each of these items one by one. We could be here for 16 hours and 37 minutes if we tried to do that. But the idea of sharing these out loud as a way to provide both the board and our stakeholders watching tonight with a sense of all of the issues that need to be addressed. Most of these are not new, but they do require adjustment for our new situation here for sure. Maybe one click larger there, Mr. Monticello. There you go. That's great. So if that's okay, Luke, is that all right if we run through this?
sure, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. All right, so you will note that I have the shortest list of all of the departments here, so it's good to be the king sometimes. But I have my
Brian,
third, yes.
Do you want to talk at all about how this looks on the page, or not show the page, but kind of what we're doing with each one of these things, or no?
I guess, Brian, my question is with this, are we talking about for one of the specific options?
These apply to all options.
Okay.
Yeah, these apply to all options. Basically, this document captures all of the areas that we believe we have to plan for, regardless of model of instruction. And again, many of these things are work that we're currently doing. But to Melissa's question, what are these going to look like given what we know will be larger holes than normal for students coming back into school. Okay. All right, so real quickly, as superintendent, I'm responsible for the communication and coordination with the board, the parent and community communication. My biggie here probably is the general oversight and support for the administrative staff. You'll see the long lists that they have. I am our person who coordinates with public health and other governmental agencies. I've been doing that since this started. In the middle of all of this, we are trying to finish our John Knight Middle School renovation program and be able to get that done successfully. To what degree the pandemic affects that remains to be seen. And then I'm going to take back that I said I have the smallest list. Because I have high school athletics on my list, I think I actually have the most significant and time-consuming an emotional element of any of these things on my list. So that's a sense of the things I'm responsible for. If we scroll down now, Mark, we're going to see what Mr. Giramani and his department must address prior to the beginning of school.
And again, the way we're doing this is thinking about how all of these play out over the course of the different scenarios. So, you know, some of them are pretty obvious, from the curriculum development to grading and student assessments, our specialty programs for English learners, interventions, etc. You know, thinking about how we're going to be supporting new teachers. I mean, especially new to the profession. I mean, can you imagine a time to be beginning your career in anything at this point? But I mean, especially in education, we need to think differently about how we're doing that. My list also includes people services. That would be Adrian Lauder. Adrian Lauder will be our point person there. You know, how we're going to do mental health services. You know, we really sense a need that we need to continue augmenting those, especially in these very challenging and stressful times. SARB, huge questions around attendance right now that we don't have direction from the state yet on. We've sort of gotten a pass. No, we didn't sort of. Everybody got a pass in the state of California for this closure. We don't have to, quote unquote, take attendance. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be monitoring. But we don't anticipate that the state's going to give us that pass again next year, nor should they. Down to behavior management, you know, we haven't had any issues with this yet, but we will. You know, somebody will find a way to be naughty, and what do we do if that's the case? Our social emotional curriculum, etc. I'll scroll down, Mark. You know, just some of the pieces that are out of LCAP, our parent liaisons. You know, talking about kinder placement, we've traditionally done a test. We've already done it by now, actually, just to get a sense of who our kindergartners are and who might need a little extra support. Not able to do that right now, so we're going to be doing some questionnaires using our parent liaisons and our kindergarten teachers to try and get a sense of who our kids are and who might need a little extra love from us. And then, of course, even down to PE, you know, what are our minutes? We're going to have minute requirements, so they're going to get waived. Lots to do.
All right, now Cindy Nguyen will run through that HR list.
Yes, good evening, everyone. We've been and will continue to have ongoing conversations with our labor partners. Those began when we officially closed schools in March, mid-March. And so we will continue those ongoing conversations, because regardless of which scenario we go with, it will change their current working conditions, and that is a negotiable item. So we currently have weekly meetings set up starting this Wednesday with our labor partners. And we'll be meeting weekly as we learn more and as this develops. We're also going to need to make sure that we're taking care of our high-risk employees, and we may need to activate our sub-pool and provide training opportunities. We are still going to continue staffing, especially our hard-to-fill positions that are mandated in order to be in compliance. And depending on who we hire for next year, we'll have our new employee orientation, even if it's done virtually. I'm pretty sure our pool of new hires will be smaller than last year's. We still need to plan our back to school activities and PD, just not quite sure exactly what those details are at the moment. School calendar adjustments, depending on the interest of the board and ongoing conversations. We had our calendar committee that took the recommendation to the board in March for the school calendar to be approved for 2021. And so we may need to reconvene our calendar committee again and do parent surveys if there's going to be an interest in changing the work or school calendar for next year to meet the 180 instructional day for students. We're going to need to work and develop with our insurance company, our stakeholders, to gather feedback and input to ensure that there's communication protocols that are put out for any possible incident reports or workman's comp reporting. And then of course, we'll need to reconvene a committee to discuss safety protocols and what do our employees need to ensure their safety while they're going to be working. So those are some things that we are going to need to do regardless of what scenarios we go with.
Thank you, Cindy.
All right, Monique Stovall, business.
Good evening. So a few business items. The first is general business operations. We'll need to develop a procedure for receiving paperwork. In accounts payable, we'll need a process for processing invoices. Accounts receivable, that's our deposits. So we'll need to identify how we're going to receive checks and invoice those who we need to invoice. Payroll, that's related to timesheets and anything related to payroll. And then of course our retirees, we want to make sure that we develop a plan for billing them for their benefits. Next is our average daily attendance. That also known as our ADA. We'll have to look towards the state and then develop processes within our district to record attendance. Contracts, we'll need to ensure that we have language that will help protect ourselves and ensure that we are paying our different vendors depending on whatever scenario we need to implement. Facility leases, there are a variety of areas on our property that we rent, and so we'll need to update our lease agreements and make sure that we're communicating with our lessees. And then of course, budget considerations for each scenario. We'll have to identify and manage all of the related costs for each scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Monique.
Okay, Kim Parrott for special education, please, Kim.
Okay, I'm going to hope that my furry children are quiet. They are barking. So special education, one of the big things that we are facing right now, of course, is a backlog of assessments. We have not been able to do any of the assessments for our kids that are transitioning to kindergarten. We're also not able to do assessments of our kids that are coming into us at age 3, coming into us from North Bay or our other programs. So we have that backlog of assessments that have got to be addressed, as long as any new assessments that are coming up, whether that's upcoming triennials or new referrals. We need to watch the balancing of our resource caseloads depending upon how we decide to open and what that's going to look like. IEPs still have to be held. Speech services still have to occur. They can occur by teletherapy if necessary. But that is a concern to how we want to continue that. The curriculum support piece of it, supporting our children that need support in their general education classrooms, which is this is a program where we not only use our specialists, but our very important paraprofessionals, which is next on my list. How are we going to effectively utilize our very trained paraprofessionals that we have out there so passionately that want to work with our children? Preschool, federal government's not waived the requirement that all children that are in service prior to age 3 are supposed to have an IEP or be assessed and have something in place by age 3. Right now, we're doing, there's a special format that we're following and getting that started. Professional development for staff. Our children that are placed at non-public schools are a consideration. Transportation, what is that going to need to look like depending upon how we open? Any technology needs, either for staff or for our students. Plus, we do have leases with the County Office of Education. There's 5 of them here in the district. And then we also have County Office of Education classrooms that are here within our district for our students that are placed there. So those are all some of the considerations that we have in special ed, majority of it.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay. And Mr. Monticello, technology.
So what we really need to do is, right now we are a Windows-based Active Directory system, and we need to move to Google and cloud-based information. It's become apparent that we need some more training in Gradebook, especially with the integration of Google Classroom. We know that we will need to figure out how to support master scheduling no matter what system we have. The good news is we have more than enough computers to be one-to-one when we open school next year. We do need to address some of our employees that have either limited or no internet at home and or equipment. We'll be implementing a new system called Remind, which some of our teachers already use, which is a text-based system to communicate with our parents. One piece that we're going to have to do is update our safety plans on how we close schools in case there is more of the pandemic and we need to use that. We also need to figure out how to set up a YouTube channel for the district. We have some teachers posting videos on YouTube and it's getting blocked because there are some other content out there. And as we move forward, this is extremely important that we figure out how to get our lunch applications online for all of our families that need to complete it starting July 1 into the system and up and running.
And Mr. Monticello is also going to take care of maintenance and operations.
So we will be planning the move to the new middle school and over the winter break. We will address what classroom setup looks like, what parents and staff and students' concerns are. We're well on the way as far as signage, hand sanitizer, masks, paper towels. We have planned for all of that. We will be working with our nursing staff to figure out where a quarantine area will be if somebody is sick at school. We will look at custodial staffing. We will also have to evaluate what happens at our schools during lunch and breaks and restrooms. We are in the middle of doing our summer projects for maintenance to make the schools make sure they're ready again, along with our custodial staff. We're evaluating PPE for not only staff but students. We will certainly have to do some training on our custodial staff on cleaning and sanitizing as we move to some higher end fogging machines. And then we're working with the schools right now on student pickup of personal belongings, which runs the gamut from musical instruments to PE clothes to the stuff that's in their desk when they left.
Thank you, sir. And Monique is going to come back and take care of food service.
Okay. For food service, the first one is social distancing rules for staff and students. Will need to identify ways to follow whatever guidelines are implemented based upon the different scenarios. Safety and sanitation, we will have to increase our cleaning and sanitation so that we can make sure that everyone is as safe as possible. Our meal service method will depend on whatever scenario it is. If we are distance learning, then we'll have to seek waivers to continue serving in the way that we are right now. If we are in a hybrid type of situation, we'll need to determine what service will look like. Next, we'll need to adjust our menus. That's part of if we're serving as we are now, that's more prepackaged, or if we are back to school in a normal fashion, then we'll have meal service in a different way. Next is our meal times. Again, depending on the different scenario, we'll have to work with the schools to adjust our meal times. With all of this, we'll have to evaluate our staffing needs. We may need to increase staff. We may need to change times and hours based upon the scenarios that we need to implement.
Thanks, Monique.
Thanks, Monique.
And this is not, these site bullets, by no means everything that has to happen at the site level, but here's the biggies really prior to us opening. So, and this work is continuing right now. So student registration, enrollment, course requests, and master schedules, all of those elements of getting kids identified and in the right places. The office staff works with the immunization tracking as well. And then the sites are currently working with their teachers on preparation for summer cleaning, getting rooms packed up and squared away so the custodians can get in here and start the summer cleaning absolutely as soon as possible. Mark's ready to have those folks take off any moment now. So there's 3 pages for you, and we don't advise talking through each of those bullets. Like I said before we went through that list, that we wanted to try to provide you with a sense that we are engaged in comprehensive review and planning. And certainly some of these items we are further along than others. They all are part of opening the new school year, but many of them will look very different depending on the exact circumstances under which we open. So we would be happy to clarify anything that we shared on this list, and at the same time thought that perhaps at this point it would be the board's pleasure just to kind of throw it wide open to you for questions of us, any comments that you have at this point in time before we kick it out into public comment.
So Brian, before we open up to more board questions and then public comment, for Thursday, I think, I know it's really hard to some extent to come up with in-depth discussion on things that you don't know yet.
Sure.
But I think in order to form opinions on how we should go, obviously the one big thing right off the bat is safety. So some of the big issues are, how do we address bathrooms? How do we address social distancing? How do we address meals, whether that's box meals to kids in the class or half day and they take their meal and leave, all those kinds of, some kind of ideas to give us an idea of how are we going to hit some of those big issues that are going to have to be overcome to keep things safe. And then, a really hard one, as Lloyd said, what are we looking at financially? I mean, how it's hard to even kind of make an educated guess, but for each of the avenues we looked at, what more would we be having to spend to make that happen in a safe fashion? That's just some of my feelings to try to have to come up with a decision. And like you said, if things change, the decision may change on a dime. I mean, if the pandemic's gone, then we go back. If we have a reburst before time to go back to school, maybe we can't, so like you said, we have to be ready for everything. But that is some information that I think would be useful. And I know you mentioned substitutes, and we've had trouble getting substitutes. And if we're going to encourage people that might be sick to stay home, how are we going to deal with that if we can't get substitutes?
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many issues, and it's going to be so complex, and it's going to be trying to make it work as we go, as we've been doing quite a bit lately.
Sure.
But yeah, those are issues that if you guys can brainstorm and try to give us any more information before Thursday, that would be great. I'm sure we'll probably discuss some of that stuff as we go here to public comment as well. But
yeah, and certainly we will do all we can there. We already have a budget update planned, and I just go back to the comment I made at the start here, that I'm not sure what actual decisions we could put in front of you folks for Thursday night. I think unless you want to take action to say, administrative team, go and plan for every possible contingency, which is what we have to do.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't resist that action on your part, because we know it's what we have to do. But clearly we are in all these moving pieces, and I don't think anybody has to talk us into, you see how comprehensive this list is that we went through here this evening. We don't believe it's complete at this point in time. We know there's elements that we haven't thought of yet or that will pop up new. And so our approach is that this is going to be well, it's underway already, obviously, and has been for some time. But we don't have the luxury of opening school come August and thinking, okay, we're like every other year prior to this one, we're going to do this in the way we've done this for 150 years now, give or take, with the adjustments around the edges. Kids come to school and are taught by teachers. Other support staff are there to help. We can't assume moving forward that we're going to have the luxury of operating under those premises. So I think, again, what we're trying to do here is just get some general consensus and understanding around here are the things we have to be prepared for, and how we communicate around these really important as well.
So just so we're clear for Thursday then, is the board going to be giving guidance based on what we're looking at right now, what the preferred method would be, knowing that there's going to be change, or are we just discussing the options?
Well, I think one thing that would probably benefit us as a management team is establishing really clear priorities for us. You mentioned two tonight that I don't know how we get away from them, and that's safety and that's finances. I think that we have to show how we're going to improve and refine and build upon the distance learning experience from this year. We have to be prepared for distance learning. Whether it's some students or all students or some part of the year or opening the year, right? That's a whole nother element. I think that if I'm in your shoes, I want to know what work is being done, what work will be done, because in most of these situations, the bulk of the work remains to be done, right? Things on that list, it's ongoing, and it will be continuous. Like I say, beyond the start of the school year. So, we'll have this conversation, and if it feels like at the end, no, we have some real specific things that we would be interested in taking action on Thursday night, then we'll be ready for that. If it is more of that sense of, okay, here are our priority areas, and we want to be informed every meeting from here on out. What's working, what progress are you guys making on these focus things? We can't go through, every item on this list every meeting, but some of these I think rise to the absolute top of the list and are things that we should be putting in front of the board and the public every 2 weeks.
Okay, Mark, if you could take down the planning task list if the other board members don't know that, need that, and then if the board, any questions from any of the other board members?
Luke, I was just going to say, I think, following up on that discussion, I'd like to see us have this as a standing item on our agenda that we continue to talk about. I don't expect we're going to make any decisions in the next few weeks, but in order to keep the public informed about what we're talking about, I had said the other day, I really believe that this is going to be a local decision. Nobody from any level of government is going to come in and tell us, this is how you're going to do it. We're the ones who are going to end up deciding this. And the only way we can do that is with public comment and public input and, complete transparency around how we're going to roll this out. And so I want to see this continue to be on our agenda and continue to have conversations about that. And I see this as just the first in a series of those conversations.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Catlin. And I think we're also going to have to be open to scheduling additional meetings. As we are tonight, having meetings just devoted to the reopening planning and process. Right now we only have one meeting on the calendar in July. that is the norm in our governance calendar, but I think we're going to have to be looking towards some additional meetings and opportunities to engage people as we get closer to that school year starting.
Yeah, thank you, Callan. Other board questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'm sure we have some people eagerly waiting to comment. So Mark, if you could look at what you have and start giving us some public comment.
We're ready. Kathy Michaels is first up.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Because these are crazy times, and I appreciate you taking your time and putting your energy in for this, because it is a new adventure for all of us. I just wanted to go back to your scenarios and throw in a couple of things to think about. In the hybrid scenario especially, would there be any possibility of having students move rather than, teachers move rather than students in a departmentalized situation? Then the kids are always in the same classroom, always in the same desk, and your cleaning might be less than you need to do otherwise. So that's one question. And then the other question was, if there was a way of finding out, and I don't even know if this is possible, which teachers are willing to be on campus 3 days a week and which teachers want to do distance learning? And can we work with those options to make the hybrid work for those people and those families who need it? So that was just a couple of thoughts.
Thank you.
And I have Holly next.
Go ahead, Holly.
Good evening. I just had a question about the hybrid model. I have a lot of friends that are teachers, and I know that this has been very hard to come and start doing the distance learning at this point and are still building on that. How would we expect our teachers to be teaching full-time and doing distance learning if we are offering those options to students?
Yeah, good question, Holly. And I don't think we'd be looking at a model where teachers are expected to do both. I think you'd be looking more at a model of having some staff designated as those who would be supporting distance learning, and then others in the classroom with the kids. This scares the heck out of us in terms of staffing this and knowing how many people you would need for classrooms and how many you might need for distance learning. This is going to be a real challenge for us. The variation from this might be that if I'm let's say that I'm a second grade teacher and I've got 24 kids on my list, and 21 of them are coming to school every day and 3 of them are in distance learning, then that might be a model where it's a little bit more feasible to have that regular classroom teacher take care of the distance learning component. And I know my friends from the Teachers Association would want to talk, if we were doing that, about how that instructor was being compensated and supported as well. So there's just those layers. I think your question is a really good one, and there's a lot of layers about how we're going to work with staff in these different circumstances.
Yeah, and for the budget, if we would need additional money to cover additional staff for those scenarios as well.
Quite possible, right? And part of the conversation that's been going on is making sure that we're able to meet the needs and interests of our families and not have families leave the district for online charters or other districts or those types of things where the fiscal impact, I've been talking about enrollment all year long, and the drop that we had, that the fiscal impact of fewer students is one that would hurt us significantly.
And I see that could be people going to the homeschool model.
Right.
That too, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Brian. Anything else, Holly?
Nope, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
I have Heather up next.
Hi, good evening, everybody.
Hi, speak up, Heather. You're kind of hard to hear.
Okay, I'll speak up. I wanted to first say thank you to the school board and to the teachers that have been working very hard to support all the students in the district. We are in unprecedented times, with ever evolving changes in standards regarding COVID-19, and it doesn't go unnoticed by myself or my family. As a healthcare provider, the standards are kind of changing pretty quickly. And that being said, Governor Newsom has been very supportive of things, and I'm curious if anybody has any foresight if there will be some general guidelines issued by the state of California for the upcoming school year.
No. Next question. I'm being facetious only a little bit. Sacramento has been very careful and deliberate in not making grand pronouncements. The things the governor, the governor said out loud in a press conference, I believe, schools wouldn't be able to reopen for the remainder of the year. That was not done in a formal manner. It was we were left kind of scrambling. That was not the only instance. And Catlin works in Sacramento, and she can speak to this a little bit more. But what we continue to find is that the onus is going to be on us local folks in terms of making our decisions. We'll work with Solano County Public Health, and they obviously have entities above them. But we closed based on local decisions, and I believe we're going to be reopening based on local decisions. Catlin, anything to add there?
I was just going to add that the other day, the state superintendent of public instruction said essentially the same thing, that that he was going to leave it up to locals in consultation with their public health officers to make local decisions about opening and closing schools. So I don't expect we'll get any direct instruction from Sacramento on what to do.
That being said, Solano County has had a low incidence of infection at this time, which can change, but also could remain where it's at. So I guess my bigger question is that if there is an idea to reopen the schools regarding the social distancing, currently CDC standards are that everybody wears a mask when social distancing is not, I'm sorry, I've been up since very early this morning, a possibility. So is there going to be some degree of, public involvement? Because I know I can get people together to make masks, and that we have a very strong community in Dixon to support the kids is all I'm saying here. So whichever direction we go, I think it would be wise to reach out to us as well to help.
Yeah, parents have taken on this super duper, not a missile, but a super duper role as educators and parents here these days. And we know it's really challenging for many, many families, especially those dealing with financial pressures as well. So however we open, we always talk about partnering between parents and the schools. We have to up our game here at this point in time. There's no way to get ourselves reopened without the highest level of parental involvement we've ever had on anything.
Thank you, Heather. Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, Mark, who's next?
I apologize. I don't see anybody else. Good night. No, sorry. Nobody with a hand up.
Anybody else who'd like to make a comment or ask a question, please put a comment or raise your hand to be given a chance.
Katie is up next.
Okay, thank you.
Hi there, everyone. I apologize if it gets a little loud in here. I have kids running around. I just want to be upfront and let you guys know that I'm in favor of a hybrid approach. Keeping safety in mind, what I'm seeing is a lack of motivation with distance learning and the social aspects, and not having sports really affecting some of the high school kids. And so my ask here is that the administration consider a different approach, like not a one-size-fits-all approach. So because I think that the needs of the kids at the elementary level are going to be different than the needs of the kids at the junior high school and high school levels. I'm not sure what that looks like. You know, I don't have quite a vision in mind, but having high schoolers myself, I can see perhaps moving toward more of a college learning experience where you attend, you know, some lecture on certain days, and then the bulk of your work is at home. I think that would help to prepare them for college, but I certainly am in favor of getting the kids back in the classroom because I'm seeing ill effects from it. And I'd be really interested to see or to hear what teachers have to say about how things are going as well. So just my 2 cents, that's all I have.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, appreciate Katie. And I just really quickly, as we work on the planning, we do fully recognize that elementary setting is different than the secondary one, for sure. I was really pleased with the survey result that actually had our elementary teachers, let me just find it really quickly, saying that they were more comfortable. I feel comfortable teaching in a digital remote learning environment right now. 60.4 agreed at the secondary level, 65.4 agreed at the elementary level. I would not have guessed when this started that we would have those kind of numbers. Everybody's working hard, but that just about 2/3 of our elementary teachers said they're feeling comfortable is a huge amount of growth. However, just because people are feeling more comfortable doesn't mean it's the way we should continue to do it. Yeah.
Can I just have been really quick on that, Brian?
Please, Mr. Germani.
Yeah, you know, there's the hybrid model is really intriguing to a lot of us who do this work, and there's a lot of ongoing conversations in at really every level of organizations about how that can go. And there are lots of different ways that are creatively being discussed, including one of the models that you just talked about. And, you know, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't plan on having, if we were in a hybrid model, I think it would absolutely look different between elementary and secondary and maybe even middle school and high school. It already looks pretty different if you go to those schools any given day, you know, very different models. And I would think that this would be just the same.
Mm-hmm. And one other quick comment, if I can, based on something that Katie said there, and that was the idea of, you know, the value of the extracurriculars and sports and such. So obviously the concerns related to the health and well-being of students and adults both, you know, it's hard to imagine contact sports taking place right now. And certainly we see that at the professional level. I'm also very concerned about our financial ability to provide the full array of extracurricular activities that we have in the past. With the devastating cuts that are coming based on the decreased revenue from the state level, and we will be making, you know, we will be having tough conversations about our finances moving forward. It's going to be interesting on the two fronts. What can we afford and what can we safely do? Big conversations to come.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Anyone else out there, Mark?
Yes, I think this is Pinky. Let me see. It just says P no.
It is. It's Pinky.
Hi, Pinky. Go ahead.
Hey, guys. Hi, guys. So I'm kind of concerned how Katie was saying, and I think Holly mentioned it too, how the kids are kind of unmotivated to really do much. And that's totally, I get it, because really, how are the teachers able to hold them accountable? So when you do come up with your hybrid model or whatever, there really does need to be a strong conversation about how to hold them accountable. Like my kids, Greg and I, are unique in that we're both at home to not give them that option to bow out on anything. So I think that needs to be a conversation. I know with Greg, his students alone, you know, he's getting maybe 45, 50% of the kids turning stuff in. And I don't know what all the circumstances are, but once he said something about credit, no credit, a bunch of kids turn things in. So I think that that's important to have that conversation eventually. Obviously, I agree with Katie with the sports. I was going to actually talk about that too, because my kids are so into sports. So hopefully we can get something like that going and just consider that. And I get finances and the distancing and everything too. But mostly just the accountability for the kids. I'm already feeling kind of bummed for Bella with the pass, no pass thing. And I know everybody's in the same boat, but having an honors AP kid, it was kind of just disheartening. So just the accountability with the students, I think is something important to think about too.
Thank you, Pinky.
Thank you.
Anyone else, Mark?
Yes, I have Kathy Michaels.
Go ahead, Kathy.
She just disappeared, so we're going to go to Jenny next.
Okay.
I'm here. I'm
Oh.
here.
Ah,
okay.
Wait, I'm talking to myself. I'm sorry. I live by myself. Talking to myself is scaring me now.
That's okay. Go ahead, Kathy.
Sorry. So as a high school teacher, I want to thank those of you who recognize that it's very difficult to motivate kids. I concur totally on that. The other thing I wanted to mention that I didn't mention was the fact that this pandemic happened at the end of the school year was a blessing in disguise for us teachers in the sense that we already knew our students. I teach primarily freshmen. The thought of having a whole bunch of 8th graders come in to distance learning and not even knowing what they look like or who they look like or anything about them, that, you know, we talk about relationships and all of you know that effective teaching is based on really good relationships. So if there's any way for us to, even if we had, you know, a live feed teaching, so the kids who wanted to be in the classroom and the parents who felt comfortable could do that, and the kids who didn't want to be, they could be watching live feed. That gives a little bit more of a relationship ability between a teacher and student so that we can help them succeed a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
I have Jenny next.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Hi, yeah, I was wondering if we go to distance learning only, for the parents that work, are their kids going to be truant if they don't get the work done? I'm just, as someone who works and is essential, I can't imagine being able to get this amount of schoolwork done in the fall.
I think, Jenny, if I can, I think your question gets to some of the core issues that are going on with this whole scenario. That on one hand, you say, well, if parents are working or not, that's not a school, that's not the school's business. It absolutely is right now. We know that many kids, most kids, would not be functioning in any kind of effective way right now without mom and dad home, mom and or dad. And in some cases, it's grandparents or guardians. And quite honestly, lots of cases right now, it's also older brother or sister or siblings, those types of things as well. So the distance learning model is not sustainable without adults at home to assist kids. And you know, we've been designed with this, kids come to school and teachers meet them and teach them there, because it is the most effective way to do this job, obviously. But on that kind of basic needs, basic hierarchy of needs approach or thinking, we're in a world of trouble if parents are back working and we're trying to do distance learning still.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have Tad up next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hi Tad, go ahead.
So I was a little confused in the comments about the state. It almost sounded like the district is going to have to make all its own decisions. And I don't really see how that could possibly work. You know, Dixon can't go one direction and all the other school districts go a completely different direction. And you're going to have some very difficult choices to make. I would suspect by the end of the year, testing will be more widely available. You might have the option to test all your students if you really push for it. There was good news today on the vaccine front. You know, that might get rolled out at the end of the year. Are you going to require students to get vaccinated immediately? How would that work if they don't? So I was hoping someone could elaborate a little bit on what you have the authority to do, what the county has the authority to do, and what the state has the authority to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted.
Yeah, I'd say there's, thanks, Ted. I think there's a lot of moving pieces on this still, right? And when you look at CDC guidance, and then you see what's happening across the country in a variety of states where guidance is being ignored, and in some places now you have court cases where orders and restrictions have been overturned, challenged and overturned in court. And quite honestly, part of the experience in the move towards closing was at the point where we closed, Solano County Public Health was saying, you don't need to close. But the school districts uniformly in Solano County said, yes, we do. And so through a lot of collaboration and communication, we made the decision to close while public health was saying you don't need to. It was the right decision to make. I don't think things are going to be very different moving forward, quite honestly, that you will continue to hear varying opinions, a variety of takes on things, and that ultimately it doesn't look like there are significant sanctions or penalties for people, agencies, whomever, that swim against the tide. I'm not sure how state or federal government could really enforce those types of things. But we do anticipate, again, I don't know if pressure is the right word, but certainly the burden of decision making will be on us at the local level.
Okay, just one follow-up. What about liability? If, you know, there's a super carrier kid that just spreads the disease everywhere, are you protected one way or the other, or what?
That remains a huge concern, right? Both for, so if we say, hey, employee, you have to come to work, and then they become ill, and there's already an executive order related to workers' compensation policy, or if it is that just that student or person is infecting other students as well. Yeah, there are serious liability concerns at the root of this as well, and there's already advocacy groups in the state are working on some of those issues. We're part of a joint powers authority, the North Bay Schools Insurance Authority. They're working on these issues as well. You know, there's not a lot of lawsuits in the country yet, but people are anticipating a whole bunch of them coming related to the shutdown, and I don't think schools would be exempt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tad.
I have Penny next.
Hi, so I just had a couple questions. One is, if we do the distance learning, is that going to continue with the current pass or no pass, or is that going to be something that will be reevaluated?
I don't think any of us could see going with pass, no pass again. Especially if we were to start the year. You know, certainly we don't know what the institutions of higher ed would feel about it, but I don't think they want to live with pass, no pass in the long term. You know, with the time to prepare, in essence, that we have right now, I think letter grades would need to return, my opinion, and I don't think much of my staff would disagree with me, although they are welcome to do so.
Okay, that's good. That's very good to know, because I know that for my son that was very disheartening to have put so much time and effort and to have, you know, straight A's and then suddenly get this report card that was a pass-fail was very frustrating. And then the next thing I have isn't really so much a question as more a suggestion. I know that, you know, you had mentioned sports, and they might possibly, even if we were allowed to do sports and it was deemed healthy, that in a good environment, that it might be a problem because of the budget cuts. And what I was going to say is just suggest that before, you know, if it is something that we feel that our kids could do in a healthy environment, that we, you know, reach out to the community and don't just cut sports. Give us that opportunity to volunteer, to coach. I mean, I coached for a couple of years before we were officially a sport, and I never got paid, and that was fine, and that was okay. And I think that a lot of our parents would be willing to, you know, maybe not be a head coach, maybe you have 3 coaches for one sport. So that's just a suggestion that I think that would be something that we should hopefully be able to look at. And because, as Heather said, I'd like to echo her sentiments. We have so much support in Dixon, and we want to do whatever we can for these kids. So please reach out to us as much as we can. Even with communications, I mean, it would be nice if we could get some emails, especially when, you know, meetings like this are changed. Like, we don't know about a Monday meeting. That's not a typical meeting. So if we could just maybe get some more communication on things, that would be appreciated.
Certainly. And I don't know if you were in the meeting already, Penny, when we went through our list of duties, and I have high school athletics as one of mine. And I joked that my list was the shortest, so I really wouldn't have to work that much, kind of deal. But the fact that high school athletics is on there, it eradicates that view. We had dialogue back in the Great Recession about cutting sports. And in my 22 years in Dixon, that was the highest level of attendance and participation in meetings that I ever saw. And I have to believe that would repeat itself if we're having the same conversation. So yes, you have to have public input on that issue for sure.
We did a long one. No, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have Debbie up next.
Hi, yeah, I'm Debbie. Debbie Thomas. I teach over at the high school, and I've been in Dixon now for, I think this is going on my 6th year. And I wanted to say thanks to the district for closing us down in March. When this first happened, I knew it was serious, but I don't think I understood the extent to how serious it was. And as I watch numbers and hear about, you know, deaths and the health issues that are happening with children and the inflammatory issues, I just want to say thank you. I know this was a difficult decision. I really want to make sure that the district office is working with the teachers and the paraeducators, the administrators as a whole, and basing our decisions on facts and not just based on public pressure or teacher pressure, admin pressure, any of that. I really want to state that health and safety should really be of utmost importance. I'm not just an educator, I'm a parent. I happen to be a single parent. And the thought of having to go back to work when we don't have clear guidelines, you know, PPE protocols and that stuff situated, it's scary. And I don't want to go and contract something, bring it home, and maybe lose my life and leave my children without a mother. So I'm not trying to be dramatic, but I also want to be very clear in that people are dying from this. This is not just your typical flu, which I think so many of us did not understand when this first started. This is really serious. And I just want to know that when I do come back to work, which I really do want to come back, but I want to make sure that when I have students come into my room and leave my room, that the doors are clean, the desks are clean, the computers are cleaned. I mean, there's some big issues. So I just want to say thank you for having the courage to close it. And I'm sure it is extremely difficult to keep it that way. Please make sure that everyone is included in this discussion when we go back so that people are informed. Again, thanks for hearing me out. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you, Debbie.
I have Eleanor up next.
Hi, Mark. This is Eleanor Pratt-Smith. I'm a teacher at the high school as well. I'm a health teacher. And Mark, I sent you I don't know if I can share my screen. I have 4 slides that I wanted to share, and it kind of ties into what Debbie has said. I find as I'm listening, as a teacher, I want to be back in the classroom. I find it's much more engaging to be with the students. It's much more fulfilling, I think, both for the students and the teachers to have that reciprocity within the education. I think that's what makes teaching a fun aspect of teaching as well. I'm hearing parents who are saying they're essential workers and they need to go back to work. How is it going to work with them, with their kids? I'm hearing people saying that that students are having a difficult time with online learning, and I'm seeing that in my experience as well. I'm also hearing that students want to get back and be active, and I understand that as well. But I have to say that safety is my biggest concern. And so, Mark, are you able to share, am I able to share my screen with these 4 slides? What it is I just created a short PowerPoint from a woman who is works at University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth, and she is an immunology and infectious disease professor. And I found that her information to me makes a lot of sense. When I'm out walking in the public, when I'm going to stores, when I'm thinking about being in the—
Josh, your favorite, Josh.
I don't know if it's possible to share that, or if I forward it to Mark, I'm not sure if it's possible. But she was saying that in order to become, well, let me ask Mark, is it possible to share my screen?
The screen sharing is turned on.
Okay, so let me see if I can do that. I don't want to share you, I want to share the screen. So this was from Dr. Erin Bromage, and like I said, she's from UMass at Dartmouth, and the link below has her bio in terms of what her background is. So when you look at that, very knowledgeable in this field. But I think what she said made a lot of sense to me. And in order for people to become infected, one obviously has to be exposed to an infectious dose, and those infections occur through airborne droplets, and the sneeze being a very high dose and a high velocity. So she's saying that if someone is sneezing or coughing next to you, that's a very high dose and a high velocity. Whereas if someone's breathing or speaking, it's a lower dose and low velocity. Yet when we're in a classroom, that's occurring all the time. And then, so if I'm a walker out walking in public and I walk by somebody, the chance of me having becoming infected is lower because I'm breathing by somebody. As long as I'm trying to maintain that physical distancing, my risk is lower than if I'm sneezing or coughing on somebody, whether it's in a grocery store or a classroom. And then also that infections occur through the infected surfaces. And so we know that classrooms are just lots of infections around them with surfaces. And I think as people have expressed, the concern being, how do we keep those surfaces clean between classes, like at the high school model, or between students coming from one desk to the next. The next thing she said is, who's transmitting the virus? And this is where I find the scary part is, at least 44% of all infections, or a majority of the community acquired transmissions, occur from people who are asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic. So, and a lot of people who don't even know they're sick are passing it on. And we're now finding out that all ages can transmit the virus as well. And then why can schools be a high-risk environment? Obviously because of our population density. And so when I'm hearing people talking about different models, that's nice to hear that we might have different people coming at different times, or some teachers doing online versus some in the classroom. Those direct interactions between teachers and admin, students and teachers, students and students, and all that. So we've talked about all these things. And so I just think these are things that I just wanted to have brought in. And this is the chart that Brian had talked about with the CDC recommendations. So I'm gonna share my screen, and I just wanted to share that just so that we have some, probably many of you already have this information, but thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. I did not see her screen, but I have also seen that article. So perhaps you could forward that to Brian and anyone who didn't get to see it, that it would be interested.
Yes, I can do that. Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Eleanor has been sending us things with some regularity, so we'll look forward to this one too. Yeah, very
Good.
helpful.
All right, who's next?
I have Jenny next.
Thanks again. I just had another question that I forgot to put on the survey, which is if you go to the morning and afternoon model, is if there's going to be transportation provided for the kids, for parents who are working and not able to get their kids to school at a split day, or also if we know if the CDC daycare centers are going to be available at all. Again, for those parents that are working, you know, daycares are considered essential services. And also if daycare is essential, I don't really understand why school isn't essential, but.
That's been an interesting question. And actually what I understand about the CDCs right now is that they are only taking in children of essential workers. And they are limited right now to either groups of 10 or 12 is the cap. And we have had that same question amongst the superintendents in the county about how do you operate a daycare, but you don't operate a classroom. And obviously there are significant differences. I'll play the Grinch again here, Jenny, I'm sorry. So we haven't provided home to school transportation in the district since 2008, the 7-8 school year. The only students who do get transported by us are students with disabilities who have the transportation included in their individual education plan, their IEP. Ready Ride is the de facto home to school transportation, and it's a city program that we don't have any say in. So the issue around transportation for parents, if you are in a split shift, is another one of those punch in the gut kind of items here of how can this possibly work.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Jenny.
I have Debbie up next.
Hi, I just, wanted to, I can sympathize with where Jenny's coming from, but I did want to reiterate that school is not daycare. It's very different. We're not babysitters. We really are educators. So please keep that in mind. It's very different than daycare services. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have Jenny up next.
So I totally realize that daycares are not educators, but right now daycares are being asked to be educators for those of us who are essential workers and aren't home. And it's sad. And it takes my 7-year-old about 5 hours to get through the amount of schoolwork that he has. And I have to sit next to him for 5 hours to try to get it done if it's not happening at daycare. So my kids don't deserve to fail just because I'm an essential worker. And that goes for so many of the other parents. And, I really feel for these special ed kids too that are not getting the services that they need. And I just think that there's a lot as a community that we're missing. So thank you. And, we as parents really do appreciate teachers, and I appreciate this meeting. It was very informative. I've never attended one of these before, but thank you all very much.
Thank you,
Come
Jenny.
back Thursday night at 6 o'clock.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
I do not see anybody with a hand up.
Okay. Anyone else? This is your chance. Okay, so do we see anything else, or is that it, Mark?
That is it.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I guess it looks like that's going to be about it for tonight. This conversation will continue on Thursday night, so anyone that's still here, please tune in at that time. And we will continue this. Couple quick coming events. As I said, May 21st is the next board meeting. June 3rd is going to be in the Main Prairie High School graduation parade. June 4th board meeting, and June 6th, the Dixon High School graduation parade. And there will
Sorry,
be
Luke,
more.
I was muted there. Can I just clarify a couple things?
Yes, jump in.
For Thursday with you, please, and just get a little bit of board direction. So earlier we heard safety, finances, and I think I added in distance learning as probably our three biggest issues right now. If it pleases the board, we can try to make those points of emphasis on Thursday night. I think maybe I can also bring in a tentative calendar kind of schedule of discussion, whether by department or we'll as a cabinet team we'll plan that out a little bit as well, and hopefully on Thursday we can kind of review and approve whether it's full action or just direction. Kind of here's how we're going to work together moving forward on this calendar, the to-do list, that kind of thing. Does that make sense for Thursday night?
That sounds good, Brian. And then obviously, I'm sure there'll be more board and public comments on safety. We can go into more specifics and continue the conversation.
Sure,
So,
sure.
Sounds great.
Anything else, other board members, anything you want to add in, or we're okay with that focus?
Hearing nothing, sounds like
okay.
That's it. Board members, would anyone like to make any announcements? Jewel?
And not right now.
Okay. Lloyd?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Melissa?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Catlin?
Nope.
Okay, then do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll move.
We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye as well. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.